The klaxons wailed through the corridors of the U.S. Sentinel as Commander Sarah Chen sprinted toward the bridge. Her boots echoed against metal decking as emergency lights strobed red through the smoke-filled passageways. The colony of New Haven was burning below them, and she had exactly 8 minutes to make an impossible choice. Status report, she barked, bursting onto the bridge. Her XO, Lieutenant Commander Marcus Rivera, stood rigid at tactical, his dark features illuminated by the holographic display showing the massacre below. 3 swarm carriers just dropped out of FTL on the far side of the moon, Rivera reported. They're launching dropships. Colony defenses are already overwhelmed. He paused, jaw clenched. Fleet Command orders us to withdraw immediately. They say we can't risk losing another destroyer. Sarah's fingernails dug into her palms as she watched the alien vessels descend toward the helpless colony. New Haven was home to over 50,000 civilians, farmers, teachers, children. The swarm didn't take prisoners. Everyone knew what happened to colonies they overran. How many dropships? She demanded. 27 confirmed launches. Our point defense grid could handle maybe half before they reached the surface. Sarah studied the tactical display, mind racing. The Sentinel wasn't meant to go toe-to-toe with swarm carriers, but the colony's underground bunkers could hold out for hours if they could just buy them time for reinforcements to arrive. "Get me Fleet Command," she ordered, dropping into the captain's chair. The comm officer's fingers flew across his console. Admiral Chen's weathered face appeared on the main screen. Sarah fought to keep her expression neutral. She hadn't spoken to her father outside of official channels since their falling out 3 years ago. "Commander Chen, I repeat, withdraw immediately." "That's an order." "Sir, there are 50,000 civilians down there. The swarm will. And there are billions more counting on us to hold the line. We cannot lose another destroyer. Not now. Withdraw immediately, or I'll have you relieved." Sarah's fingers tightened on the armrests. The Sentinel's experimental shield modifications were designed specifically to counter swarm weapons. Let us prove they work. Absolutely not. That technology is classified and untested. What we need, Sarah cut in, is to stop running. "Sir." The bridge crew held their breath. Even through the grainy hologram, she could see the muscle working in her father's jaw. "Final warning, Commander. Withdraw now." Sarah closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was steel. "All hands, battle stations. Helm, take us in. Weapons, target those dropships. We make our stand here." "Commander Chen," her father thundered, "this is a direct violation of." She cut the transmission. "They'll court-martial you for this," Rivera said quietly beside her. "Probably." Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. "But first we have a colony to save." Status of the shield modifications. Online but untested. Engineering says they're as ready as they'll ever be. That'll have to do. Sound general quarters. All hands prepare for combat maneuvers. The Sentinel's engines roared to life as they dove toward the atmosphere. The first wave of dropships was already entering the upper atmosphere, trailing fire as they screamed toward the surface. Multiple incoming missiles. Tactical reported. Swarm carriers are moving to engage. "Steady as she goes," Sarah ordered. "Wait for them to commit." The bridge crew worked their stations with practiced efficiency, but she could feel the tension crackling in the air. They all knew what happened to ships that went up against multiple swarm carriers. The first salvo of alien missiles streaked toward them, writhing with alien energy. "Shield holding," engineering reported, surprise evident in his voice. "The modifications are working." Sarah allowed herself a moment of satisfaction before refocusing on the battle. "All batteries, open fire. Priority targets are those dropships. Don't let a single one reach the surface." The Sentinel's guns blazed to life, filling space with streams of superheated plasma. Dropships began exploding in magnificent fireballs, but more kept coming. The swarm carriers were closing fast, their organic hulls bristling with weapons. 14 dropships destroyed, Rivera reported, but the carriers are almost in range for their main guns. Sarah nodded grimly. Hold position. Engineering. Divert all available power to forward shields. She opened the ship-wide comm. All hands, brace for impact. The first blast from the nearest carrier struck like a hammer, making the entire ship shudder. But the shields held. Return fire, Sarah ordered. Show them what this ship can do. For the next 20 minutes, space around New Haven became an inferno as the single Earth destroyer went toe-to-toe with 3 swarm carriers. The experimental shields proved their worth, absorbing punishment that would have torn a normal ship apart. But they couldn't hold forever. Shields at 30%. Engineering called out. We can't take much more of this. Sarah gripped her chair as another impact rocked the ship. Status of the dropships. Last one destroyed, Rivera reported. Colony is secure for now. But those carriers. Plot a micro-jump, Sarah ordered. Get us right between them. We'll give them something new to think about. The navigator's eyes widened. Ma'am, at that range. Do it. Space twisted as the Sentinel vanished and reappeared in the heart of the enemy formation. At point-blank range, their guns tore into the organic hulls of the alien ships. One carrier's spine snapped under the assault, its body breaking apart in a cascade of secondary explosions. Direct hit, tactical whooped. One carrier destroyed. But the victory was short-lived. The other 2 carriers bracketed them with devastating crossfire. Alarms screamed as systems began failing across the ship. Multiple hull breaches. Engineering reported. Fires on decks 3 through 7. We can't. The rest was lost in static as a massive impact threw half the bridge crew from their stations. Sarah pulled herself back to her feet, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. Status. We're dead in space, Rivera reported grimly. Engines gone, weapons offline. But he managed a tired smile. The colony is safe. Reinforcements just dropped out of FTL at the edge of the system. Sarah nodded, watching through the flickering view screen as the swarm carriers broke off their attack and fled rather than face the approaching Earth fleet. They'd won. New Haven would survive. Send word to the colony, she ordered. Tell them. She swayed slightly as the adrenaline began to fade. Tell them help is coming. And what about Fleet Command? Rivera asked quietly. Sarah sank back into her chair, suddenly exhausted. Tell them Commander Chen respectfully awaits their response to her actions. She closed her eyes. And get damage control teams moving. Something tells me we're going to need this ship again before this is over. Hours later, as repair crews swarmed over the Sentinel's battered hull, Sarah received new orders. She was being reassigned, not to a court-martial as expected, but to command of an experimental new vessel called the Breacher. Her father's message was brief. The shield modifications worked. Maybe it's time we stopped running. Sarah smiled, touching the fresh scar on her forehead. Maybe it was. The Breacher emerged from FTL like a shark breaking the surface of a dark ocean. Commander Sarah Chen watched through the bridge's panoramic viewport as the stars reoriented themselves, her new ship's experimental drive system making the transition smoother than any vessel she previously commanded. Transition complete, announced Lieutenant Kira Paddle from the helm, her fingers dancing across the holographic controls. All systems nominal. Sarah nodded, still getting used to the Breacher's uniquely organic bridge design. Unlike the utilitarian layout of the Sentinel, this ship felt almost alive. Surfaces curved and flowed, biosynthetic panels pulsed with soft light, and the bridge crew's neural interfaces allowed direct communication with the ship's systems. Beginning passive scan of the target area, reported Dr. James Morrison, their civilian Sinotech specialist. The lanky scientist had protested being assigned to a military vessel, but his expertise with alien technology made him essential to the mission. No active emissions detected yet. 3 weeks had passed since the battle at New Haven. The Breacher's maiden voyage was supposed to be a simple investigation of an automated distress beacon from a remote mining outpost. But Sarah knew better than to expect anything simple anymore. Not since intelligence suggested the swarm might be working with an unknown third party. "Talk to me about this ghost ship, Doctor," Sarah said, turning to Morrison. He pulled up a holographic display, showing grainy footage from automated sensors. 2 days ago, long-range arrays detected an unknown vessel in high orbit around the mining colony. Its configuration doesn't match any known human or swarm designs. Before we could get detailed scans, it vanished. Then the colony went dark. "Population?" Sarah asked, though she already knew the answer. 812, her XO, Commander Rivera, replied. He'd followed her from the Sentinel, one of the few familiar faces aboard this experimental ship, mostly miners and their families. Sarah studied the fuzzy image of the alien vessel. Its architecture was all wrong. Geometric shapes that seemed to defy physics, surfaces that appeared to fold in on themselves. Any response to our hails? Communications Officer Chen Wei, no relation, shook his head. "Nothing on any frequency, ma'am. The colony's automated systems are still broadcasting, but it's just dead air." "Multiple contacts," Patel suddenly called out. "Debris field ahead, bearing 035. On screen," Sarah ordered. The main display shifted, showing a sprawling field of twisted metal and frozen gases. Her stomach tightened as she recognized pieces of mining equipment, habitat modules, and other things. "Life signs?" she asked quietly. "Negative," Morrison reported, his face pale. "But these readings—" "Commander, the molecular structure of the debris has been altered at a fundamental level. It's as if something was experimenting with the basic properties of matter itself." "Mom." Wei's voice was urgent. "Getting a signal. I think it's coming from inside the debris field." "Let's hear it." Static filled the bridge, resolving into a rhythmic pattern that made Sarah's teeth ache. Morrison's eyes widened as he studied his readings. "That's not a communication," he said. "It's more like a resonance frequency. The debris is vibrating in response to some kind of energy field." "Source." There, Patel highlighted a section of the debris field. As they watched, the fragments began moving, drawn together by an unseen force. Metal twisted and reformed, creating something new and horrifyingly wrong. "Battle stations," Sarah ordered, her voice calm despite the ice in her veins. "Tactical, ready weapons, but hold fire unless I give the word." The crew responded with professional efficiency, but she could feel their unease. They'd all fought the swarm, mindless, brutal, but at least comprehensible. This was something else entirely. The debris continued to coalesce, forming a rough approximation of a ship. Its surface rippled like liquid metal, patterns emerging and dissolving in nauseating sequences. "Commander," Morrison whispered, "those patterns, they're mathematical expressions, incredibly complex. It's like it's trying to solve equations using reality itself as variables." "Incoming transmission," Wei announced. Commander, it's using our own comm frequencies." "How did it?" "Put it through." The bridge speakers crackled. A voice emerged, not speaking, but somehow translating pure mathematics into sound. Sarah felt her neural interface buzz sympathetically, and judging by the crew's reactions, they felt it too. Morrison's fingers flew across his console. "It's not just communicating, it's probing, testing, looking for weaknesses in our understanding of physics itself. Can you translate?" "Trying, but—" He broke off as new equations scrolled across his screen. "Oh God. Commander, we need to get out of here. Now." "Explain." "These equations, they're not trying to communicate. They're trying to rewrite the laws of physics in our local space, if they succeed." The alien construct suddenly pulsed with impossible light. Sarah felt reality twist around them as space itself began to warp. "Evasive maneuvers," she ordered. "Get us clear." Patel yanked the ship hard to port as energy beams lashed out from the construct. Where they touched the debris field, matter simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but edited out of reality itself. Shields holding, Rivera reported, but these weapons, they're not attacking the shields directly. They're trying to change the mathematical constants that make shields possible. Sarah's mind raced. They couldn't fight an enemy that could rewrite physics itself. But maybe, Morrison, could we use the breacher's biosynthetic systems to introduce an undefined variable into their equations? The scientist's eyes lit up. Yes. The organic components operate partly on quantum uncertainty principles. If we could amplify that effect. Do it. Tactical. Prepare to fire all banks on my mark. Target their primary computation nodes, those points where the patterns converge. The alien construct was still growing, drawing in more debris and becoming more defined. Its surface now rippled with equations of such complexity that looking at them directly caused physical pain. Ready on your mark, Tactical reported. Sarah waited until the construct began another attack sequence. Now, fire everything we've got. The breacher's weapons blazed, enhanced by Morrison's hasty modifications. Where they struck, the construct's mathematical certainty wavered. Patterns became chaotic. Equations spiraled into infinity. It's working. Morrison exulted. The quantum uncertainty is cascading through their calculations. The construct's surface began to break apart as its fundamental assumptions failed. Reality reasserted itself with a vengeance, tearing the impossible ship back into its component pieces. Get us out of here, Sarah ordered. Maximum speed. And download everything we can about that thing. Something tells me this won't be our last encounter with them. As the breacher accelerated away from the debris field, Sarah stared at the final sensor readings. The swarm was bad enough, but now they faced an enemy that considered the laws of physics merely guidelines to be rewritten. And somewhere out there, 812 colonists had vanished without a trace. Send a priority message to Fleet Command, she told Y. Tell them. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Tell them we've confirmed first contact with a Type IOA civilization. And may God help us all. The dreams always started the same way. Sarah stood in the debris field, watching equations crawl across frozen bodies, rewriting their molecular structure. But tonight was different. Tonight, the mathematical patterns weren't just on the victims. They were inside her own mind, rearranging her thoughts like pieces on a chessboard. She woke with a start as the breacher's alert system pulsed through her neural interface. Bridge. Report. Multiple system failures across all decks. Rivera's voice was tight with tension. We've lost environmental control in sections 3 through 7. Engineering reports quantum fluctuations in the drive core. Sarah was already moving, pulling on her uniform as she strode toward the bridge. Casualties. 2 technicians in critical condition. Dr. Morrison is treating them now, but Rivera paused. Commander, these aren't random failures. Someone sabotaged us. The bridge was chaos when Sarah arrived. Emergency lighting cast everything in a blood-red glow as crew members fought to contain the cascade of system failures. Lieutenant Patel's hands flew across her console, trying to stabilize their course as the drive fluctuations threatened to tear them apart. Status of the quantum containment field. Sarah demanded. Holding, but barely, Patel responded. Whatever they did to the drive core, it's causing ripples in local space-time. We're leaving a trail that anyone could follow. Sarah's neural interface buzzed with incoming damage reports. The sabotage was elegant, precise. Whoever did this understood the breacher's experimental systems intimately. Lock down all critical systems. Full security sweep of every deck. No one moves without. The lights flickered, and for a moment, Sarah saw mathematical equations sliding across the walls. She blinked, and they were gone. Commander, Rivera was watching her with concern. Are you all right? Fine. She pushed away the memory of her dream. Where's Morrison? Still in medical, working on the injured technicians. He says their cellular structure is changing somehow. Before Sarah could respond, Dr. Morrison's voice crackled over the comm. Commander, you need to see this. Now. The medical bay was eerily quiet when Sarah arrived. Morrison stood over one of the injured technicians, his face grave as he studied a holographic display of the patient's cellular structure. Look at this, he said without preamble, expanding the image. Their DNA isn't just damaged, it's being rewritten. The same mathematical patterns we saw on the ghost ship. Sarah felt her blood run cold. They're being transformed. Worse, they're being reprogrammed. And they're not the only ones. Morrison turned to her, his eyes haunted. I've detected trace amounts of the same changes throughout the crew, including you, Commander. Sarah's hand unconsciously went to her temple, where her neural interface connected to her skull. How? The ghost ship wasn't just attacking us. It was infecting us, using our own technology against us. The neural interfaces, the biosynthetic systems, they're all pathways for the infection to spread. Can you stop it? Morrison shook his head. Not completely. But I think I know who accelerated the process. He pulled up another display, showing crew genetic profiles. Someone on board has been exposed to much higher levels of the mathematical virus. They're acting as a focal point, amplifying its effects. Who? The doctor's response was cut off by a ship-wide alert. Commander to the bridge. Emergency. When Sarah reached the bridge, she found the main screen filled with an impossible sight. The equations that had haunted her dreams were now crawling across every surface, every console, every crew member's skin. It's beautiful, isn't it? Lieutenant Patil turned from her station, her eyes now glowing with otherworldly patterns. The perfection of pure mathematics. The ability to rewrite reality itself. Patil smiled, and the equations on her skin began to pulse. They showed me the truth, Commander. Our primitive understanding of reality. It's like children playing with blocks. They can give us so much more. Let me show you. The air around Patil began to distort as reality itself bent to her will. Crew members grabbed their heads in pain as their neural interfaces screamed with mathematical corruption. Morrison. Sarah shouted into her comm. How do we stop this? The quantum uncertainty principle. His voice crackled back. It worked before. Introduce enough chaos into their equations, and the whole system falls apart. Sarah looked at her own hands, seeing the faint patterns beginning to emerge on her skin. They'd all been infected, but maybe that was the key. She focused on her neural interface, deliberately introducing random thoughts, impossible calculations, human irrationality into the perfect mathematical system. The equations on her skin began to waver. What are you doing? Patil's voice held a note of panic. The calculations must be perfect. The universe must be corrected. The universe isn't meant to be perfect, Sarah grunted, fighting against the mathematical corruption trying to rewrite her mind. That's what they don't understand. It's the chaos, the uncertainty, the free will that makes us human. She pushed harder, broadcasting the conceptual noise through her neural interface to the rest of the crew. One by one, they began to fight back against the infection, adding their own chaos to the system. Patil screamed as her perfect equations began to unravel. The mathematical patterns on her skin twisted, tried to compensate, and finally shattered. She collapsed, unconscious but alive. Locked down her neural interface, Sarah ordered as medical teams rushed in. In fact, lock down everyone's. We need to purge these systems completely. Hours later, Sarah stood in her quarters, staring at her reflection. The equations were gone from her skin, but she could still feel them, lurking just below the surface of reality. They'd won this battle, but the war was just beginning. Her comm chimed. Commander, Morrison's voice was urgent. I've been analyzing Patil's genetic samples. The mathematical virus, it wasn't just trying to infect us, it was preparing us. For what? Integration. These entities, they're not just trying to change our universe. They're trying to change us, make us compatible with whatever reality they come from. He paused. And, Commander, according to these readings, it's already started. Sarah touched her neural interface, feeling the quantum uncertainties that had saved them still pulsing beneath her skin. Send everything we have to Fleet Command, and plot a course for the nearest deep space research facility. She took a deep breath. It's time to find out exactly what we're becoming. The research facility hung in deep space like a steel spider web, its spindly arms reaching into the void. Sarah watched it grow larger in the view screen as the breacher approached, her mind dwelling on the changes they'd all experienced since their encounter with the mathematical entity. Coming alongside Research Station Delta, Ensign Wei reported from his new position at helm control. After Lieutenant Paddle's transformation, the crew had reshuffled, adapting to their losses. Station control has granted us priority docking. Dr. Morrison stood beside Sarah, his tablet displaying the latest test results. The mathematical infection had gone dormant in most of the crew, but its effects lingered. Enhanced cognitive abilities, impossible intuitions, dreams filled with equations that seemed to solve themselves. Commander, Rivera called from tactical, long-range sensors are picking up something odd. Some kind of spatial distortion following our quantum wake. Before Sarah could respond, alarms blared across the bridge. The research station's massive form suddenly wavered, like a reflection in disturbed water. Mathematical patterns, terrifyingly familiar, began spreading across its surface. They followed us, Sarah whispered. Station control, emergency protocols. Get your people out. The transmission cut off as reality twisted. The space between the breacher and the station seemed to fold, compress, and then tear open. Through the rift came something that hurt to look at. A vessel that existed in more dimensions than human eyes could process. Multiple contacts. Rivera shouted. They're everywhere. They're coming through from. I don't even know how to describe these sensor readings. Sarah's neural interface buzzed with increasing intensity as the mathematical entities began their assault. But this time, she was ready for them. Morrison, initiate protocol chaos. The scientist nodded grimly and activated the modifications they'd spent weeks preparing. The breacher's biosynthetic systems began pulsing with controlled quantum uncertainty, creating a bubble of probability fluctuations around the ship. All hands, Sarah broadcast shipwide. Prepare for emergency jump. Engineering. Divert all power to the experimental drive. But Commander, Morrison protested, we haven't tested the probability drive in combat conditions. The calculations are impossible anyway. Sarah finished. That's exactly what we need right now. She turned to Wei. Plot a course through that rift before it closes. We're taking the fight to them. The crew looked at her with a mixture of fear and determination. They'd all known this moment might come, the point where they'd have to choose between staying in the reality they knew or diving into the mathematical chaos that their enemies called home. Jump in 5. Wei counted down as the hostile vessels converged on their position. 4, 3. The research station was almost completely transformed now, its structure becoming a lattice of pure mathematics. Sarah could feel the equations trying to reach into her mind through her neural interface, but the chaos protocols held them at bay. 2, 1. Jumping. The breacher plunged into the rift. Reality shattered around them like broken glass, reforming into something that human minds were never meant to comprehend. The bridge crew cried out as their neural interfaces struggled to translate what they were seeing into something meaningful. Status. Sarah demanded, fighting back waves of vertigo. We're somewhere, Morrison reported, his voice trained. The laws of physics here are more like suggestions. Our hull integrity is holding, but only because the concept of integrity keeps shifting. Hostile contacts. Everywhere. Nowhere. Both at once. Rivera's tactical display showed impossible geometries shifting and flowing. They're surprised, Commander. They never expected us to follow them here. Sarah allowed herself a grim smile. Then let's use that surprise. Engineering, initiate the quantum pulse sequence we prepared. Target their mathematical certainty. Make them face the same chaos they've been using against us. The breachers' modified weapons fired, sending waves of pure probability through the mathematical dimension. Where they struck, the enemy's perfect equations fractured, creating cascading errors in their reality editing calculations. But the victory was short-lived. A massive presence emerged from the mathematical chaos, a construct of pure thought and abstract concepts given form. "Commander," Morrison's voice was barely a whisper. "That's their control node, the source of the infection. Though there's no word in any human language for what we're seeing." Sarah studied the entity through eyes that were becoming increasingly adapted to this impossible space. The mathematical patterns that had once seemed alien now held a terrible clarity. She could see the logic behind their assault on human space. They weren't invading. They were converting, transforming all of reality to match their own abstract perfection. "All power to weapons," she ordered. "We end this here." The entity responded, not with weapons, but with pure mathematics. Equations of such complexity that they threatened to overwhelm the chaos protocols and rewrite the breacher's entire existence. But Sarah had one last card to play. "Morrison, remember how you said human irrationality was our greatest defense? Time to prove it. All hands, disable your neural interface filters. Let them see exactly what human consciousness really is." The crew complied, and suddenly the mathematical dimension was flooded with something the entities had never encountered: the raw, unfiltered chaos of human thought. Dreams, emotions, contradictions, and impossibilities crashed through their perfect equations like a tsunami of irrationality. The entity recoiled, its mathematical structure beginning to break down as it tried to process concepts that defied its fundamental nature. The infection in the crew's bodies resonated with their thoughts, amplifying the effect. "It's working," Morrison shouted. "Their entire network is destabilizing. But, Commander, the rift is collapsing. If we don't leave now." Sarah looked at her crew, humans who had stared into the mathematical abyss and found a way to fight back. "Take us home," she ordered. "But first, leave them something to remember us by." The breacher fired one last quantum pulse, encoded with the complete history of human art, music, literature, and imagination, an endless cascade of beautiful irrationality that would echo through their mathematical realm forever. As they burst back into normal space, Sarah knew the war wasn't over. The entities would return, perhaps finding new ways to impose their perfect logic on human chaos. But now they knew that humanity's greatest weakness, its unpredictability, was also its greatest strength. "Set course for Earth," she ordered. "We need to prepare them for what's coming." "And what exactly is coming, Commander?" Rivera asked. Sarah touched her neural interface, feeling the mathematical patterns that now lived inside all of them, changed but not conquering. "The next stage of evolution. But this time, we'll do it our way, with all our beautiful, irrational humanity intact." Earth's orbital defense grid sparkled against the black of space, a testament to human engineering and determination. But Sarah Chen knew it wouldn't be enough. Not against what was coming. The breacher floated in high orbit among the gathered fleet, the largest assemblage of human warships in history. Every vessel had been retrofitted with quantum uncertainty generators based on their discoveries, but Sarah could feel through her modified neural interface that it wouldn't be sufficient. "Multiple dimensional rifts forming," Rivera reported, his voice steady despite the gravity of the situation. "They're larger than anything we've encountered before." On the main display, space itself began to tear open. Through the wounds in reality poured the mathematical entities. Their impossible ships now evolved to incorporate aspects of human chaos, making them even more dangerous. "They learned from us," Morrison observed grimly. "Used our own irrationality against us. The infection in our bodies. It wasn't just changing us. We were changing them too." Sarah nodded, watching as the combined Earth fleet engaged the first wave. "That's why this has to end today, one way or another." The battle erupted across Earth's orbital space. Traditional weapons mixed with quantum uncertainty pulses as humanity fought to defend its homeworld. But the entities had adapted, using their new understanding of human unpredictability to counter their defenses. "Commander," Wei called out, "incoming transmission from Fleet Admiral Chen." Sarah's father's hologram appeared on the bridge, looking older than she'd ever seen him. "The equations are spreading through the defense grid," he reported without preamble. "They're not just attacking our ships, they're trying to rewrite Earth itself, transform the entire planet into their kind of space." "How long?" "Hours at most." "Sarah." He paused, and she could see the cost of command weighing on him. "The Council is considering the Omega Protocol." Sarah felt her blood run cold. The Omega Protocol, using experimental weapons to destroy Earth rather than let it fall to the enemy. "Request permission to try one last option." Her father studied her for a long moment. "The breachers drive core modifications." "Yes, if we can't stop them from rewriting our reality." She took a deep breath. "Maybe we can rewrite it first." The Admiral's hologram flickered as another barrage of mathematical weapons impacted the defense grid. "The calculations show it's impossible. The energy requirements alone." "That's just it, Father. We need to stop thinking in terms of what's possible." Sarah's neural interface hummed as she accessed the ship's new systems. "We need to embrace the impossible." After a long moment, he nodded. "You have 1 hour. After that, I can't delay the Council any longer." As the transmission ended, Sarah turned to her crew. "Everything we've learned about the mathematical entities, about the infection, about our own transformation, it's been leading to this moment. Morrison, status of the probability drive." The scientist checked his readings. "Modified as you specified. But, Commander, what you're proposing breaks every law of physics we know." "Good." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. "Because the laws of physics are exactly what we need to change." She opened a ship-wide channel. "All hands, this is the Commander. What we're about to attempt has never been done before. We're going to use the probability drive to create our own version of the entity's mathematical space, one that preserves our humanity while changing the fundamental rules of our universe." She paused, looking at each member of her bridge crew. "I won't lie to you. The chances of survival are incalculable. But it's better than watching Earth transform into something unrecognizable. Anyone who wants to evacuate should do so now." Not a single crew member moved. "Very well." Sarah sat in her command chair, feeling the mathematical patterns under her skin resonating with the ship's systems. "Begin the sequence." The breacher's experimental drive core spun up to impossible speeds as Morrison's modifications took effect. Around them, space began to shimmer with new possibilities. "Multiple hostile contacts converging on our position," Rivera warned. "They know what we're trying to do." "Hold course," Sarah ordered. "Wei, take us into the heart of their formation." "Morrison, begin the probability cascade." The breacher plunged toward the largest concentration of enemy vessels, its weapons blazing with conventional fire to mask their true purpose. The mathematical entities responded with reality-warping attacks, but Sarah had anticipated this. "Now," she commanded. The probability drive activated, but instead of trying to jump through space, it began to rewrite it. The mathematical infection in the crew's body served as a conduit, connecting their human consciousness to the fundamental forces of the universe. Reality shuddered. Through her neural interface, Sarah could feel the change beginning. The entity's perfect equations met humanity's structured chaos, and in their collision, something new was born. "Commander," Morrison's voice was filled with wonder. "It's working. The probability field is expanding exponentially. The laws of physics are realigning." On the main screen, Sarah watched as both human and entity ships were enveloped in the transformation. But unlike the entity's attempt to impose mathematical perfection, this change was different. It preserved the essential nature of both sides while creating a new framework for existence itself. All ships, all stations, Sarah broadcast on all frequencies. Prepare for universal realignment in 10 seconds. Don't fight the change. Guide it. Remember what makes us human. The countdown reached 0, and Sarah felt reality flex one final time. The mathematical patterns that had haunted humanity for so long merged with the quantum uncertainty of human consciousness. Physics itself rewrote its own rules. When the transformation was complete, Earth still hung in space, beautiful and blue. But it was different now. Everything was. Humanity had evolved, not into the pure mathematics of the entities, but into something uniquely their own. Beings who could walk the line between chaos and order, probability and certainty. The entities' ships hung motionless around them, their perfect equations now part of a larger, more complex symphony of existence. Status? Sarah asked, marveling at how even speech felt different in this new reality. The transformation is stable, Morrison reported. We've created a hybrid space, one where both our species can exist. The entities, they're not attacking. I think they're trying to understand what we've done. Sarah stood, looking out at the changed universe. Humanity had faced its greatest challenge, not by fighting or surrendering, but by finding a third option. By changing the rules themselves. Send word to Fleet Command, she ordered. Tell them that the war is over, and the real work is about to begin. As the breacher moved through this new reality, Sarah thought about all they had lost and gained in this transformation. They were still human, still beautifully chaotic and imperfect, but now they were something more too. Pioneers in a universe where the impossible was just another mathematical equation waiting to be rewritten. The mathematical patterns under her skin pulsed one final time, not with alien perfection, but with human possibility. And in that moment, Sarah Chen smiled, knowing that their greatest adventure was just beginning.